91,000 apparently Boris Johnson overnight, 1 in 5 in an attempt to save 3.5 billion quid. You're quite at the centre of this, the picture of nobody at work, which resonated with a lot but upset a few people. But you're right, why aren't more people in the civil service working in their offices and doing their jobs?
It's a very good question, and the Civil Service Union came out yesterday, it was in today's Telegraph, saying that people should be allowed to work from abroad. So you have visions of people in their Tuscan villas occasionally dialing in to do their job. This isn't serious. We are facing issues with the cost of living. We've got an issue in Ukraine. We need people beavering away. We've got people not getting their passports. We've people not getting their driving licences. If everything was running amazingly smoothly, you might say working from home was fine, but we need people actually physically doing their jobs to make the state more efficient. And the union asking for working abroad, the popularity of Mondays and Fridays as working from home days does give you an indication that it's not always about better working practices.
Apparently this attempt by Boris, 91,000 jobs, could save over 3.5 billion quid and ease the cost of living crisis. Peter Heaton-Jones, ex-Tory MP, was on the show the other day, Jacob, and he said it's all well and good getting the money in, it's how that's distributed and how quickly that can be distributed. That's a question from several people. Can that money be distributed quickly enough?
Well, my responsibility is to save the money, not to spend it. But dealing with an inflation, there are various things that you have to do. You have to have the monetary answer, which is the responsibility of the Bank of England. Fiscally, you have to be pretty prudent, because spending more money is in and of itself inflationary, particularly if it's deficit financed. The other thing you have to do is to have the supply side changes that make doing business easier. So it's a whole programme, in addition to the support that the government's already announced and is giving to the least well-off, because it's important to remember that inflation hits the least well-off most. They're the ones with the least leeway when prices start rising.
Windfall tax, suggested by the Labour Party, suggested by the Liberals. It seems over the weekend and this week there's a warming inside the Chancellor's office. I don't know if this is true, you can enlighten us, that this might happen. In fact, the leader, I think, of Shell or BP came out this week and said, we wouldn't stop investment, it's not that unfair. In terms of a short-term answer, isn't a windfall tax to either sort a price or make it easier for people, isn't that a way, Jacob, to perhaps help people in these hard times?
I wonder what the purpose of the windfall tax is. That there's this assumption the windfall tax in and of itself helps the cost of living crisis. Well, it doesn't. What it does is it raises a bit of tax. Now, tax is not a cost-free opportunity economically. Corporations are not a honeypot in which governments can pick into or dip into. That if a company pays more tax, particularly a global corporation, it will look across the world at its net margin and it will try and achieve that over an economic cycle. And if it's getting a lower net margin in one country than another, it will raise prices to get back to its net margin. So this proposed windfall tax could in and of itself create a further inflation. So I'm not sure that it is this magic wand answer, and BP's given a slightly different answer. I think it was in today's Times, saying that inevitably investment plans would be affected.
But then what should your government do specifically to ease this cost of living crisis?
Well, there are a number of things that have been done and can continue to be done. First of all, £1 billion has been made available to local councils. And the advantage of this is that local councils know who in their local community may need the greatest support, so it can be very direct and targeted support. As I said, the least well-off are hit most by inflation. There's been an increase in the national living wage, so that's worth £1,000 to people in full-time work. There's been a reduction in the universal credit withdrawal rate, worth another £1,000 to people on universal credit. So things are being done to help people directly who are the least well off. And this is very important because the solutions to inflation as a structural economic issue are long-term and are ones that require decisions to be made that are not immediately popular.
Right, short-fire questions. Is Liz Truss right? Should the sanctions on Russia remain until all of their troops are out of Ukraine?
Liz Truss is almost always right.
You love him.
She's a great foreign secretary.
You're scared of her, aren't you, Jacob? I absolutely can tell that.
I'm not really scared of anybody very much. But,
what, you're scared of me? Do you think Sir Keir will be fined?
Oh, I shouldn't. I'd love to speculate on that. It's such an interesting topic of conversation.
If he is fine, won't they have to find Dominic Cummings as well? 2 birds in 1 stone for Boris Johnson.
I mean, look, poor old Starmer. He has been hoisted with his own petard, and that's a matter of him. But politicians shouldn't be too puritanical and wave the piety card. It doesn't normally play well in Peoria.
My dad is no longer with us. He thought you were his favourite politician. Could Jeremy Kyle please ask JRM if he supports the ban on petrol and diesel cars from 2030?
Well, it's a ban on new cars being sold. We'll have to deal with the world as it is. People will carry on driving petrol and diesel cars after 2030, and it's important that in the 7.5 years remaining, technology improves sufficiently to make that realistic. But it's sensible to try and set targets to get to net zero, but I would remind people that the target for net zero is 2050, not before that, and the interim targets may prove problematic.
Owen Harmon, can you ask JRM, please, when the first flights of illegal migrants to Rwanda are due to depart?
I don't know the date, but I think it's an extremely sensible policy, and a fair policy, that it's about stopping the evil business of people trafficking, and people who make thousands of pounds by bringing people on life-endangering crossings that exploit the people they are moving.
OK. Jacob Rees-Mogg, scrapping net zero and foreign aid, surely that would help?
Well, we have cut foreign aid to deal with the excess costs of COVID, and that was a policy that I supported. Net zero is 2050. So between now and 2050, there's quite a lot of time. But we need to look at what other countries are doing. And no politician is going to be elected on a platform of saying we're going to make you cold and poor. And that's why when the Prime Minister last year gave an interview to The Sun, and he said this is all about technology. So I was slightly havering on the cars issue, because the technology needs to be there to make all this work, so that we can not only move to net zero, but we can do so with a higher standard of living. We're not going to be cave dwellers. The Green Party's approach to this, that we put on sackcloth and ashes and go back to caves, will not work.
Ask JRM, why don't we remove 10 fishing licences from the French, every illegal dinghy that lands on our shores? This will then make the French government react when their own people start protesting. Neil in Swansea.
Neil in Swansea is a very tough nut. I rather like that suggestion, but I don't think I could make it government policy.
Be good though, wouldn't it? Would he run for leader of the Tory party and Prime Minister's Robert in Brighton? Can I just tell you what he's going to say? He's going to say my absolute support is with Boris Johnson. Jacob Rees-Mogg.
My absolute support is with Boris Johnson.
Fantastic.
You could do this. You don't need me to come in
anymore.
anymore.
Do. Listen, you're my friend. I love it. I could talk to you forever. Tim says, can you ask Jacob, why do political decisions and actions take so long to do? Is it because politicians are unaccountable for the taxpayer money they waste and earn whilst taking their time to do everything? It's interesting.
And your correspondent is absolutely spot on. It's extremely frustrating. I mean, I've only been in government for a relatively short time, but it takes a long time to get something decided. The ways to make decisions involve an awful lot of consultation. And we've set things up to say that we consult the world and his wife about everything we want to do, even if it's a manifesto commitment that has a mandate for it. This
is I have to give you this. This is brilliant. Jacob Rees-Mogg, you could be a shining light. Can you please explain when we'll finally see a Conservative government again and not the Labour, Liberal, Green mess of a coalition Boris Johnson's presiding over? What about traditional Conservative voters? I have to tell you this, a lot of people who will come on this show and ring this show will say they're not interested in the Green levies, they're not interested in all this. They want a return to tax cuts and traditional Tory policies. Would that be a way for Boris Johnson to garner more support?
Look, I'm very keen on traditional Tory policies, and I think we're delivering a lot of them, and what we've announced on the civil service is very interesting. I dug up the papers from the beginning of the Thatcher government and what they did in this regard, and they started doing exactly the same things. Actually, Michael Heseltine, who does it in the Department of Environment, and he has to sign off on every new hire in a huge department, and he does that for a few months before handing it on to try and get things under control, and that's what Conservatives always have to do. So I would argue this is a proper Conservative government, and it is about making the state smaller, making the state more efficient, delivering for our voters, and frankly allowing people to get on with their own lives.
talkTV, you've been watching it, I know you have. You love it, don't you?
Oh, he's brilliant.
I want to offer you a show. Could you work on some other station occasionally? I think you should be on talkTV. Can I ask you now, can you do this, could you come and talk to me maybe once a month? I know you're a busy man, you've got more kids than me.
It's great coming on. I love coming on. I can't commit to a show as a minister. I could only do a bit of freelancing before I became a minister.
They said he's only allowed to do 5 minutes. Well, I'm glad you're a minister, and I do think you should stand. if Boris Johnson goes?
Well, I want Boris to carry on and on and on. We're about the same age, so...
Are you?
Yeah, he's a couple of years older than
How old are you?
I am. 52.
I can't believe... How old do you think I am? I'm the oldest man by a mile in the room.
You're 30.
I'm 57, JRM. I'm finished.
But Robert Walpole did 21 years, so I'm hoping that the PM will have that.
He's a fan of yours. Do you think he'll survive?
PM?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. He's a great leader. I mean, he does get all the big decisions right. It's absolutely... we are so lucky to have him at a time of particular difficulty.
You might have heard, you probably have, I was talking about him, a big news story the other day, it went everywhere. I was saying that he'd been on 2 very important meetings to Finland and Swindon, and it went everywhere. I had Buckland on saying, actually, Swindon's been part of NATO for 50 years, Jez, and Cirencester rang and said, if Swindon joins them, we're going to declare war. Jacob...
That's brilliant and very modest of you. We all make those slips of the tongue, and they are very funny when they're made. You'll be on... It used to be done by Dennis Norden, and it was great fun.
It'll be all right in the night,
Yes.
200 quid. Listen, Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you so much. Always good. You're always welcome. And we've asked questions that you lot wanted. Thank you so much indeed.